Welcome back to Raw AI Solutions, the podcast where we explore how business leaders are navigating the fast-moving world of AI and digital transformation. I'm your host, Denise Powell, and today we are joined by Khaled McGonnell, CEO and Chief Cloud Hiker of Cloud Hikers. Khaled, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Denise.
Khaled, I was wondering if you'd like to start us off by telling our listeners a little bit about yourself and your company.
Yeah, thank you. So, as you say, Khaled McGonnell, I founded Cloud Hikers just over a couple of years ago. Many people will know me as K, so feel free. And I've been doing digital transformation for 2 decades. Started off in SAP, saw the light, and came to Salesforce about 7-8 years ago. Set up my own outfit because I felt that there was a lot of clients looking for a service that a lot of systems integrators were not necessarily interested in providing. And so we focus on quite a high value on-site based consulting service, and currently very involved in Agentforce and driving sales and pipeline through smart use of agentic platforms, LLMs, and good old-fashioned data modeling and coding and whatnot. So that's a bit about us.
That's excellent. So I was going to say, tell us a bit about your journey. So I know that you weren't happy with it, but what kind of things did you just think we could really make a difference here? This is what we're going to set ourselves apart here.
Yeah, there's so many different problems and solutions out there, and I think one size fits all can never be true. I think that was the problem that I was finding, is that in a marketplace that had been dominated by a playbook that said offshoring is the answer, you saw offshoring being shoehorned into every implementation, and conversations were focused a lot more on blended rates than on outcomes and speed of innovation. And ultimately, that's not what clients were wanting. I think clients understand when offshoring and outsourcing in such a wholesale way can work. It absolutely can work. I've been very proud to work with some incredible teams based in India and Malaysia and Kenya and all over the world. But there's a certain scale that you need to get to make that work. It's more of a factory model. I deal with clients who have really small, nimble, quite expert in-house teams. They want to be very much part of the delivery project, and they want a partner who will work with them the way they want to be worked with. And then, and this is perhaps a real kicker, leave at the end, right? God forbid that we shouldn't end with a 10-year managed service contract. And that's very much what we're there to do. So we land more senior on-site resources. We tend to focus on architecture and consultancy, and we tend to work with developers based offshore once we've done the work on solutioning and requirements. And then we take that to land, working with the client to iterate on the evolving build, test it out, actually get it embedded, and ensure, crucially, that this thing that was given birth to with such promise actually does deliver results. And so the people that procure these systems, the CFOs, the heads of IT, actually get the results that they can take to their CEO and to the board.
Yeah. And unfortunately, there's such a bad reputation out there by consultants. They want to land and then expand and then just stay there as long as they can. So it's true.
Yeah, absolutely. There's that, and part of the problem is you have a bait and switch. So you will dangle some genuine industry experts in front of the client in the pre-sales conversations. And when it comes to the actual implementation team, you see a very different cast of actors arriving. And then post-implementation, another group. So, you keep as a client getting a kind of really a reduced service in the bluntest terms.
I always say you sell with your A team and you deliver with your C team. And it's frustrating.
Yeah. And if I was going to say, what are we trying to buck? That's exactly it. you'll quite often, for your sins, you'll get me as a billable resource on the projects as well. I'm quite proud of that. We want to be delivering a high value consulting services. So there's not many of us, but we have an outsized impact.
That's excellent. That's really good to know. It's refreshing to know. So tell me something. In the last year, have you seen any major trend shifts?
You can't talk about tech without mentioning AI. And it's funny because at any given moment we could go through our LinkedIn and you'll see opinions on both extremes of the spectrum. So you'll see people talking about the endless possibilities of AI, and I look at them and go, steady on. I think it is absolutely a transformative technology, but if you really want to say, well, what's that going to mean in terms of top line, bottom line? I think you're looking at significant gains for large companies. We're talking about 5% reduction in overheads. You give a CFO that option, they're going to take it every single day, right? But there's a far difference between that and some of the stuff that you're seeing where, our entire workforce is going to be nothing but AI agents. I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. And then shockingly, there are people, and these are people in tech, who are talking about the fact that these LLMs are extremely overhyped. Look, the way I look at it is LLMs are, I am specific. I think in 10 years time, we're going to laugh about how we talked about AI because LLMs will be old. ChatGPT will feel really, really ersatz then. And we'll have something new and it would be unbelievably better. It would be something that to some extent we can't imagine could be true now. LLMs are amazing, right? It's like going from the abacus to a calculator, just with words. And so, should you be using it? Absolutely. I'd sure as hell rather have a calculator than an abacus. But I'm also aware that at the end of that, there's still an accountant using this tool. It's a powerful tool. It's so exciting that we have it in our toolkit, but it's just another extremely powerful capability in our broad toolkit.
Yeah, love that. And what are you doing as a company to stay ahead of the curve?
So that's a very loaded question because everyone's on this curve. Everyone's on it. The hype train is real with AI and with LLMs. I think, funnily enough, you actually need to peel it back and say, let's talk about business results. And what we noticed is that a lot of AI, particularly in the Salesforce space, was talking about what they term as service cloud voice use cases. So this will be something where you've already made a purchase and maybe you want to process a return or you want to make a booking. And it's really cool that you can do those and they're fully agentic experiences. And I'm still sometimes shocked and impressed with how human the AI agent sounds and how intelligent apparently the response is. It does what it sets out to do. The problem with anything that isn't explicitly related to revenue is the business case. And to compound that, these AI tools were usage-based cost. So if you're pitching this to a CFO, and at some point you're going to, that person's going to want to know how much is it going to cost and how much am I going to get? And both of those were difficult to answer. So what we've tried to do is to strip back to basics and focus on an industry sector that is a niche that we really understand, which is construction hire services. These are businesses that sell to the major building contractors. And we understand their end-to-end model really, really well. And we use agents in numerous parts of the end-to-end journey. It's not just an AI agent, it's AI agents as and when they're helpful to do so. And the trick is, it's about an outcome. So we're there to grow pipeline, we're there to help with account-based marketing. And because those are explicitly revenue generators, the business case is kind of baked into the outcome. The fact that it's an AI agent really slips into the background. So yes, we're taking advantage of the latest technology. We'd be mad not to. But this is about good old-fashioned growing pipe and growing accounts.
Yeah, very, very true. Well, In today's topic, we're going to be speaking about why CEOs struggle to keep their teams aligned during major change. So you've seen some major shifts in your industry. What do you see that your customers are asking? Well, they're asking for something different now than what they were a year ago. Can you explain what the difference is?
Yeah, I mean it's all changed and it's all the same, right? The at the top level, they want the same thing, right? A CEO is there to grow the value of the company. They basically have three levers. They can grow revenue, they can grow profit, or they can mitigate risk, right? So I think that AI really plays into revenue and profit. And we talked about a couple of examples, right? So you can use AI to help you build leads. You can use AI to expose opportunities to cross-sell and upsell. You can use AI as call center agents so that you can reduce the time to serve, happier customers, less cost to serve, more scalable. So I think what CEOs are under from their boards and from their chairman is more velocity than ever before, because of course they've seen these things. They've probably used ChatGPT and they've said, well, you know what, why aren't you using this? And I think that CEOs have just got increasing expectation on time to innovate, and that that bar, that expectation is just shortening and shortening. And so for them, it's not just about utilizing technology to deliver these classic results in terms of revenue and profit. It's proving that they can do that within a time frame of a few months. You know, when my career started, every program I was on was multi-year, you know, and if anything happened in year one in terms of go live, that was shockingly fast, right? That would be hilarious these days, you know, that you just don't see programs like that. And I think that's a good thing. I really think that was a very ill-disciplined approach. I understand stuff was slower to do back then, and you know, large companies take a long time to, you know, turn the oil tanker, but CEOs just don't have that bandwidth anymore. They're probably going to be expected to deliver an ROI horizon, if not within 12 months, certainly within 24. And if they're not delivering it within 24, as a CEO once said to me, that's not my problem to solve. That's my successors. And that's, you know, that's a sort of timescale that I really think, you know, if we teleported 40 years back, you know, CEOs, it was, you know, job for life was not an uncommon thing to hear. So, you know, in the span of a generation, we've gone from 40 years to 40 months to you know, your entire legacy defined in that period.
And I think a big thing was COVID when they came out. We as a society had to pivot and scale so radically that all of a sudden we started making decisions, making changes within a matter of weeks, let alone months. So we could have hybrid working, stay at home. It was just incredible. And I think that opened the eyes to a lot of people that the way we're working was very inefficient, and there's a much more efficient way of working.
Yeah, I mean, God, it's when you think back on that time, I sometimes almost can't believe it really happened. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, I remember queuing up to go to the supermarket, and that was the highlight of my week. Me and my wife would have an argument like, "Oh, you went in last time." You know, but you're right. We went from a normal way of operating, and I think truly unprecedented. The entire world went into lockdown. You know, January of 2020 was the point where it all started to lock down, and by April of that year, you could on your Zoom call speak to basically anyone on the planet, and they all had the same story, which was, yep, we're under lockdown, we have run out of toilet paper, and our kids are driving us nuts. And you know, that was incredible. This truly globally shared experience, and businesses had to adapt, and people had to adapt, and society had to adapt in weeks. It was a remarkable period, and I think you're absolutely right. I think it sets a train in motion, And, I can't help but feel that LLMs and the advent of ChatGPT was to some extent a consequence of that. The timing just feels too much of a coincidence that there's no causality there.
Yeah. But it did make us realize the art of the possible. We can move a lot faster, and we don't have to have these projects that take years on end. We can make decisions a lot faster. And there are technical decisions out there that can now take weeks to deliver, especially using AI. But actually, when a business starts to scale fast, say when you triple the pipeline or expand into new markets, where do you most often see the alignment between the teams start to slip? And how do you catch that before it starts to impact performance?
Yeah, they talk about culture eating strategy for breakfast, and it's so true. And this is a big challenge that CEOs have. If we've already agreed that they have less time than ever before to make a change, and if we could agree that all changes start with values and culture, and then you try and create strategies that are within that wrapper, we then have this counterpoint, which is, well, if I have values and culture, but I'm driving change, these are opposing forces. And I've got to do it fast. The faster you do it, the rougher ride it's going to be. But that's not a negotiable, right? And I remember actually reading some advice from as little as 10 years ago, and they talk about this kind of gradual process. And it's like, well, that's great, but it's not workable, right? That idea that it can be gradual, you may as well just scrunch that up and throw it in the bin. You can't go slower. So I guess, ironically, or perhaps helpfully, the same tools that are forcing this pace of change could also be the answer. I think a lot of CEOs would love to be a coach in a lot more of the meetings that take place that they know they cannot attend, or at the very least a fly on the wall with an ability to tap into, what is the mood, what is the culture, how are people executing upon the strategy. And with LLMs, there is a feasible way to accomplish that, right? CEO cannot be in every meeting, but every meeting can have an AI note taker. Every meeting can have prompts that the CEO maybe spends half a day defining, working with their strategic leads, and say, yeah, equip our teams with this, maybe the management tier. And, each time you get the AI note taker's results, run the prompt on it and evaluate, and then provide some coaching notes. So I think that the very thing that's creating an absolute headache for CEOs could also be a way for them to solve the pain that it generates. And so the scalability of that cultural approach is something that I think CEOs could take advantage of.
Yeah. Do you think CEOs' roles are going to be in jeopardy in, say, 5 years' time?
No.
Well, not CEO, sorry, CIO.
No. In fact, let me be candid. The AI revolution is going to result in job losses. I don't like lying about this sense that we're going to generate so much value that this extra value is going to result in more work for the existing employees. I think that there are jobs that exist today that are not going to exist in 5 years' time to anywhere near the level that they've existed in the past. Think of blacksmiths, right? There are still some, but from something that went to every village in every corner of the planet, it's rare. And I think that there are some vocations that LLMs are so good at doing what they do that it's going to really polarize. And so I think that there'll be some people who are real experts. If we take an example of someone whose job is to do SEO copywriting, LLMs are just going to occupy that space. But that doesn't mean that someone who's genuinely a established thought leader isn't going to generate a huge amount of volume of business and income through continuing to write original content. I think what you're going to see is that, bell curve, right? The LLMs are really good at giving you average content, but we're always hungry for stuff at the edge of understanding. And so I think that humans will always have a part, but we are at that narrowing edge of a curve. And so those people who are more average are going to struggle. The problem is, what about people who are new entrants? And I feel very sorry for people who are learning their trade. No one starts at the top of their game. And how do they learn? Well, they have a go and they learn something from it and they get better over time. And so I think the new entrants who may well be the best writers of the future are going to have far fewer opportunities to apply their trade. And so I think there's a challenge for us as a society to work out, how do we leverage AI for the betterment of society in general, rather than just always thinking about it as a commercial opportunity.
Yeah, I like that. So tell me, when big strategy shifts happen at the top, so whether it's bringing AI or not, what is one metric or signal that says, okay, this has now landed in the company and the front lines, they're good with this change has taken place?
So I'm going to cheat slightly, if I'm allowed, and to say, sometimes it's the behaviors that you're not seeing which are as useful an indicator of something having landed as a metric. When I'm thinking of a metric, and maybe that's because of my, I'm a techie, I want a dashboard that I can click a refresh button on. But sometimes it's in the feels, the vibes. And one common complaint that results from this lack of alignment, particularly on the cultural element, are escalations and decisions that are getting escalated up. Well, we didn't know what the answer was, so we had to escalate it up. And I've heard of many C-levels getting increasingly frustrated about the sheer volume of decisions that are getting escalated up to them. And their frustration is, they of course need to scale by delegating down and empowering their teams, and they think that they're doing that, and yet these things are coming back up again. So I think that would be a good indication. If you're a C-level and you're feeling like you're getting involved in a lot more escalations than you used to, the reason is you're changing the playbook. You're fundamentally changing the playbook, and that's a healthy thing. But creativity and destruction are related. And so what's happening is, people both think that they're singing from what used to be the same hymn sheet, right? And I think that always has to be the going in position. People are going into every decision and dilemma trying to do the best job that they can based on the established rules. And that's the question. What are the rules? The rules are changing. They're being rewritten all the time. And so leadership are being brought in because they're the referee. It's like, we thought that it was answer A, they think it's answer B, and honestly, we couldn't get beyond that. So, and then often the C-levels will say, well, actually, it's neither A or B. There's a new way. It's C. And I think that is a good metric. Are you getting dragged into an awful lot of meetings that you hadn't needed to before? If you're seeing friction between two leads that you didn't see before, sales and marketing, sales and operations. I'm going to pick on sales because I am a salesperson, so I'm allowed to beat up on sales. But let's be honest, right? Sales sometimes get they rub up some of our other functions the wrong way. But if you're seeing more of that, if you're trying to introduce new products and there's friction between sales and your manufacturing team, you've promised X and we could only output Y. It's these are real conversations that happen. Maybe there's a reason for that. And again, the CEO as the final arbiter, the judge in the court, is going to see merit in both cases, and will ultimately come down to those three metrics again. Sales are there to drive revenue. I love them for that. My operations teams are there to deliver quality service and to ensure that we run in a profitable way. But, and this is a key thing, risk is something that my back office has closer to their heart, bluntly, than sales do. Sales are willing to be risk takers, but your ops and compliance teams aren't. There's a reason why legal want to take a long time to read through the copy. There's a reason why they're spending so much time testing new solutions. It's because they know if these things don't pass muster, there could be real reputational risk, and reputational risk can harm companies in an enormous way that could eliminate any of the revenue and profit gains that you might get. So you've got to balance these this healthy tension. And I think that would be the metric. Are you seeing more of these sort of disagreements? If you are, it indicates that change is happening, but that you might need to be more involved or find a more scalable way of dispersing the new rules of the game.
Yeah, absolutely. So in your view, does generative AI help teams stay on message and aligned, or can it create even more confusion? Especially if the core direction isn't actually clear.
Yeah, I mean, let's start by having a bit of fun. I mean, have you tortured ChatGPT at some point? Did you ever just have a go at it where you ask it to give you an opinion on anything, right? Just pick a random topic and then tell it that you disagree vehemently and give it 10 good reasons why. ChatGPT is very good at then very subserviently bowing to your greater wisdom and say, "Oh, you're absolutely right, Denise. I'm so sorry. You are. That's a brilliant point, and it's really sycophantic. If you're in a certain mood, it's great, right? and if insofar as that's true, we can see the problem. ChatGPT, and it won't admit this to you, is an echo chamber. And the other thing it does is LLMs don't actually know the difference between good and bad. What they know is what's a popular correlated response to a given set of. Okay, so again, it's this bell curve. It doesn't actually know what the very, very best performing text is. It just knows what's the most likely text. It's going to choose something that's right in the middle. And you wouldn't pick a sports team that way, right? You want Messi, you want Ronaldo. You don't want the average guy. You don't want me, kicking a football. That would be I'd be the most embarrassed of the lot of you, right? And this is where the challenge comes. If your LLMs are producing average responses and you abdicate too much of your strategic thinking to the LLMs, you are doing yourself a disservice, because what you're doing is amplifying the average, you're amplifying mediocrity, you're not selecting for success. And so I think that as much as LLMs can definitely help with scalability, you have to make sure you've got skin in the game and defining good. Once you've done that, you can tell the LLM, this is what good looks like. These are the rules. And then what's beautiful about that is, having defined that, the LLM will keep it honest. And, we talked about AI note takers. So you could literally run in an automated fashion every time new notes go up, do an evaluation, give that feedback to the participants. How amazing would that be, right? Real-time performance management in a really non-confrontational way, just saying this was good, this could be improved, work on it next time. You're getting that every single time. It'd be incredible for just about any department.
Yeah. I often wonder if the English people had actually written ChatGPT, because it is so non-offensive, so polite.
Yeah, Erin Mayer, talks about different, the culture map and different ways of giving feedback and power dynamics. And I'd love to know if I had a Russian version of ChatGPT, whether it just give it to me straight. That would amuse me so much. And in theory, it should as well, because that's just much more common in Russia than it is in the UK. So yeah, I wonder that we have a very, very positive, very Americanized version of how to speak and how to give feedback and how to agree or disagree with someone. It would be lovely to see that becoming a little bit more culturally nuanced, because Dutch users are also known for being pretty direct. They must hate it. Sometimes using it, I don't want to sound like that. That's not authentic, and that's really important. You want it to amplify who you are, not be just this agentic experience. Because I think we're all starting to get that sense. When you read text, there's little hints like M dashes. I didn't even know what an M dash was, and I kept seeing it come up, and I told my prompt, I was like, stop doing that, please. It's too much of a telltale. It wouldn't do it. It kept disobeying me, and this was a really important moment in our architecture, actually, because we realized that you have to think of your agents not as people, right? I could have a job description for a given person and say, you have to do all these things, and not have to second guess. Some of those things are contradictory. An LLM hates that. It basically at some point is going to say, oh, I know I've been asked to do both. I'm going to do one or the other. I do not know how to do both. But if you break it down and say, okay, actually, I'm not hiring a human being. I can create 1,000 agents to do a task. And you break it down and say, look, your one reason for existing on the planet is to read stuff and get rid of M dashes. And that's what we have. We have this kind of production line, a bit like a newspaper. So we have researchers, we have journalists that write copy, and we have editors. And they are literally just looking at the copy and saying, does it abide by the rules? They're not meant to editorialize or write new stuff, and they're just there to compare to the brand standard sheet and say, right, I'm going to get rid of that, I'm going to get rid of this, word count is too high, all of that sort of stuff. So if you give each agent really, really small tasks, you get far better, more reliable results, and you get rid of these horrible telltale signs that it's clearly AI underpinning it all.
Yeah. And I think it's our laziness that we don't do that. We like to start with the prompts and then just go and get everything all done in one.
Yeah.
And it's not the way to extract the best out of AI, that's for sure.
Yeah, and in defense of everyone that's doing that, that was the advice at the beginning, right? Write really large prompts. Now, I wouldn't go as far as to say that advice is wrong, but I think you need to be a little bit more nuanced about that and say all the advice has to be relevant to a given outcome. So it's all about researching and summarizing, or it's all about abiding by rules, or it's all about synthesizing and creating, a reworded version of all these inputs. That's the thing, you literally can have as many agents as you want, and they can do the most atomic tasks. So you can really, in the way that you would never design an org chart with humans, you can have these crazy agentic org charts. It's like, what's your job? Well, my job is to look at all the text that we ever write and get rid of M dashes. I'm going to pick on them because I really hate them. But that could be it, right? You're never going to have on an org chart, I hope, no one's job as a human was ever get rid of M dashes in any copy that you see. But this is the thing, you've got these agentic org charts, I think, in the future where it's like, right, that's your one task and you're brilliant at doing that. And that's all I want you to do.
Yeah, love that. So Tommy, if you had to have a blank check to automate one internal process, what would you overhaul first?
It's got to come to culture. It's got to come to culture, because that's the hardest one to solve. You didn't tell me it had to be real. You just said if I had a magic wand. Because if we assume that our performance management and our HR processes are working effectively, so we've brought the right people in, we've rewarded them well, and we know that they're good at their job. And yet, even if that's true, we can get friction. We can get times when people aren't quite doing it the way we really hoped, in the spirit of the company, according to the culture and values. That, in a world where that's changing faster than ever, keeping people bound in that sense, that not just that you're all in the boat and rowing in the right direction, but that you're driven by the same mission, that same sense of excitement and shared purpose. And yeah, I think if you could have a scalable way of doing that, making sure that people's belief in what you were doing and the way that you wanted to do it kept on track, regardless of what change was coming every day and week, that would be incredible.
Yeah. Wow. Well, looking ahead, what is the next stage for Cloud Hackers over the next 6 to 12 months?
So we've developed these products for construction hire services, and we are engaging with anyone who sells to building contractors to help them grow their pipeline in ways they simply haven't been able to do before, and help them just do the end-to-end optimally. So it's not just about sales pipeline. It's got to start with sales pipeline, but we want to sell fast. We want to grow accounts. We then want to delight customers. We want to ensure that, what's funny about delighting customers is often in delighting customers, you're also making your CFO happy, because often what customers want is speed of service. They don't necessarily want you to spend more on them. They just, once they've decided to buy a service or buy a product, they want it to work and they want to have it quick. Actually, if you can do that instantaneously, then that probably means it cost almost nothing to do that. And so your cost to serve is also driving down as your time to serve is. And when those two are coming down, customers are happier. So there's a real win-win that could happen there. So making sure that we're not just winning work, but we're enabling companies to scale, that we're giving the people who invest in Salesforce clear and rapid return on investment, absolutely critical. You mentioned earlier a sense of malaise and disappointment about working with systems integrators, working with consultancies, and frankly, with buying software. There's far too many cases where a lot of money was spent with a given return on investment promise that just never stacked up. In some cases, projects that end up completely failing. They just give up hope that they're going to land, and they decide, let's stop throwing good money after bad. And I think that's our mission in life, is to ensure that when you are taking the good decision to do digital transformation, that you get the results that encourage you to go down this path, and that you get them quickly.
Yeah. And what are the biggest challenges that are standing in your way from getting to where you want to get to?
As a startup, you have got to do a lot with a few people. And, Denise, I'm sure that, you wear many hats, I wear many hats. And I think the challenge is bearing the hats that you should bear and recruiting and outsourcing for the ones that you needn't. And I think getting that balance right is one of those questions that keeps me up awake at night. I often wonder. And oddly, I even consult with ChatGPT and say, what do you think? and it's very helpful sometimes for just giving me a reassurance that maybe I'm not making any wildly wrong decisions.
Love that. So if you could resolve one of those with like a click of a finger, what would it be?
Do you know, honestly, and I hope this doesn't sound too mercenary, and I did say I'm a salesperson at heart. I think that there's this concept of winners' problems. If you don't sell, everything else doesn't matter. You have the privilege of solving all of these problems because you won work. So I'll always take growth, because I'm convinced that the rest is a beautiful problem to have. And I'm really blessed to have a magnificent team. I'm working with some truly brilliant people. And I know that as much as they might despair at me for some of the situations that I might get us in, with trying to drive for ambition, that they're just so brilliant that they know how to handle that and to straddle that, ambition and growth with consistent excellence in execution. But yeah, I'd say resolve the very hardest problem, the from which all other problems spawn, which is sell some work. And if you sell some work, what a wonderful thing to have 1,000 problems to solve.
Absolutely. That's brilliant. Well, thanks very much for unpacking that for us. It's brilliant. Before we wrap up, what's one piece of advice you would have given yourself before you even started on this journey?
I think it depends how far I go. I think if I go back to university era, and I'm going to pick that because I'm really passionate about working with students, because as I mentioned, I think that the job market is really tough and it's only getting harder. So my advice to them would be not to worry too much about those first career decisions. I see a lot of people with their first dipping of the toe into the job market, we say, but I don't want to do this and I do want to do that. And it's funny because, with a couple of decades behind, I've heard the most wild stories about, I've got a friend who was a vet, a very good vet. He's now as far removed from that as possible. He's a corporate lawyer. Specializes in intellectual property. I mean, just imagine from the North Yorkshire fields, lambing, to being in a boardroom talking about the minutiae of intellectual property law. And I've seen this so many times. People just decide, well, this isn't right for me, and changing and being happier as a result. And I think that there's a lot of wasted time worrying about getting that first job right. And I just think, get out there and do something and learn from it. And it really doesn't matter what it is. If you're lucky enough to get an internship at Goldman Sachs, you don't need this advice from me. But if you're struggling in the job market, I just think do something. Volunteer even. But so long as you're out there and you're doing stuff and you're working with people in some guise, I mean that, lowercase w, you're going to learn more about yourself. People are going to learn about you. You can start telling interesting stories. And ultimately, it's the interesting stories that when you're in an interview are going to make them pick you over everyone else. And I think that's that, you create an interesting life by living it, not second guessing, apply for them, or, is this really the sector I want to go into? That's just procrastination. It's getting you nowhere. So I'd say just have a go and see what comes your way and learn from it, and know that if that doesn't feel like the right thing, you're a better person off the back of it and you've learned something.
Yeah. I've got this great saying I live by. It's easier to turn a ship that's already moving forward than trying to change a ship in harbour, turn a ship in harbour.
That is great. I'm going to steal that. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, listen, Khaled, it's been absolutely wonderful having you on the podcast. For those of you who'd like to know more about Cloud Hikers and Khaled, contact details are below in the description. So, Khaled, thank you so much for your time. It's been brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise.